Your greatest pain can become your greatest source of power if you decide to own it. What if I told you that the same childhood that nearly destroyed someone became the fuel for a global mission that changed millions of lives? Let me be real with you. You don't need a perfect beginning to create a powerful life. You don't need applause to rise. You don't need support to succeed. You need one thing: a decision. A decision to rise, even when the world has done everything in its power to keep you down. Some people are born into love. Others are born into survival. And when survival becomes your foundation, pain becomes your teacher. But if you listen closely, that pain will give you power. There's a moment in life when pain becomes more than just a feeling. It becomes a fork in the road. One path leads to resentment, blame, and emotional paralysis. The other leads to growth, power, and a life of purpose. The only difference between the two is the meaning we assign to that pain. Because pain isn't the enemy. Pain is feedback. Pain is direction. And for those who are willing to listen to it, pain becomes the most honest teacher life has to offer. Most people run from pain. They numb it. They distract themselves. They suppress it deep enough that they pretend it's no longer there. But it is. It lives in the body. It echoes in the mind. It shapes every decision, every reaction, every relationship, until you face it, until you stop running and finally ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? The truth is, those who've endured the deepest pain often carry the greatest power. Not in spite of what they went through, but because of it. You don't gain strength by being comfortable. You gain it by surviving the fire. When life burns you, it burns away everything that was never truly yours to begin with. The lies, the masks, the illusions. And what's left is raw, unfiltered truth. That truth is where your power lives. That truth is where transformation begins. Some people were never hugged, never told, "I'm proud of you." Never felt safe in their own homes. Some were made to feel invisible, like their voice didn't matter, like their worth was tied to someone else's approval. That kind of pain doesn't fade quickly. It shapes how you see the world, but it also creates an edge, a hunger, a different level of resilience. It gives you the ability to see people more clearly, to feel more deeply, to connect more authentically, because you know what it means to be broken. The most powerful people in this world are not the ones who avoided struggle. They're the ones who alchemized it. They took the hits, the rejections, the abandonment, the abuse, and they turned it into energy, into focus, into fire. The person who has never been tested will never understand what they're truly capable of. But the person who's been through hell and still shows up, that's a different level of power. That's real mastery. That's leadership born from the trenches. Pain will introduce you to parts of yourself that comfort never could. It'll show you who you are when everything else is stripped away. It'll reveal your beliefs, your triggers, your survival instincts. And once you see it, once you become conscious of what pain created in you, you can choose to rewrite the script. You don't have to repeat what you came from. You don't have to keep wearing the identity that trauma gave you. You get to decide, right now, what your pain means. And that's where the shift happens. When pain stops being the enemy and becomes the spark. When it becomes the fuel for purpose, for vision, for mission. Because when you've known deep emotional pain, when you've sat in that dark place with nothing but your own thoughts, you develop something rare. You develop empathy. You develop grit. You develop a level of emotional muscle that can't be taught, only earned. The ones who have suffered and risen are the ones who can speak with conviction. They don't need theory. They speak from experience. They move people because they've moved themselves. They've gone through the fire and found the strength to keep going. Not because they were fearless, but because they were no longer willing to let pain define them. They understood that pain wasn't the curse. It was the calling. There comes a moment when you look at the patterns around you. The dysfunction, the pain, the emotional chaos, and something inside you whispers, "This can't be all there is." Maybe you were raised around anger that erupted like wildfire over the smallest things. Maybe you saw relationships crumble because no one knew how to love without control, how to give without keeping score. Maybe you watched people you loved fall victim to their own demons. Addiction, self-doubt, bitterness, and deep down, you feared the same would happen to you. But here's the truth. You were not born to repeat the cycle. You were born to break it. You are not a continuation of someone else's pain. You are not here to carry the weight of generations. Just because you were exposed to dysfunction doesn't mean you're destined to live in it. What you witnessed growing up might have shaped your lens, but it doesn't have to shape your life. You can choose to see clearly now. You can choose to interrupt the story, to take the pen out of life's hand and say, "I'm writing this next chapter myself." People often internalize their environment, especially as children. If all you ever saw was instability, you start to believe that instability is normal. If no one around you ever spoke hope into your life, you start to think hope is a fairy tale. But that's not truth. That's programming. And like all programming, it can be rewritten. Just because the people who raised you were broken doesn't mean you're beyond repair. Just because love came with conditions doesn't mean it always will. The first step to breaking the cycle is to realize you are not them. You are you, and you get to choose a new way. There is immeasurable power in the word, no more. When you say it with certainty, with emotional force, something shifts inside you. No more silence, no more shame, no more patterns passed down like inheritance. That decision, that moment of defiance, becomes your turning point, because what's passed down only continues when no one's brave enough to confront it. But you're here, you're listening, you're aware, and awareness is the birthplace of change. Change doesn't require perfection. It requires commitment. Maybe you weren't taught emotional intelligence. Now you can learn it. Maybe you never saw real love modeled. Now you get to define it. Maybe you were taught that emotions are weakness. Now you get to feel them fully and still stand strong. That is how cycles are broken. Not with blame, but with brave action. Not by waiting for someone else to do the work, but by choosing to become what you never had. Every time you choose differently, every time you pause instead of react, love instead of lash out, speak instead of suppress, you are building a new legacy. A legacy not of pain, but of power. Not of survival, but of significance. You become the first link in a new chain. The one who says, "It may have started with them, but it ends with me." And in that moment, you don't just rewrite your own story. You rewrite it for everyone who comes after you. You are not weak for having come from dysfunction. You are strong for recognizing it. You are powerful for choosing not to let it continue. You are courageous for standing in the fire and refusing to pass it forward. That choice, that clarity, gives you authority. The authority to say, "This will not be my identity. This will not define my relationships. This will not own my future." Just because you saw it doesn't mean you are it. Just because it happened around you doesn't mean it has to live within you. You get to choose new habits, new words, new ways of being. And every time you do, you chip away at the old story and carve a new one that's real, one that's yours. There's a different kind of hunger that comes from not having. It's not about food. It's about a deep, unshakable craving for more certainty, more meaning, more love, more control over your life. That kind of hunger doesn't fade, it fuels. When you've grown up without the things most people take for granted. When you've been ignored, dismissed, neglected, that lack becomes the spark that ignites something fierce inside you. And that, right there, is where greatness begins. Because people who've always had everything handed to them rarely develop the emotional muscle it takes to climb from the bottom. But when you've known what it's like to go without love, without stability, without encouragement, you develop an intensity that can't be taught. You become a seeker, a builder, a fighter. You get scrappy, resourceful. You stop waiting for someone to hand you the opportunity, and you start creating it. That's not just hunger. That's raw, focused energy. That's a superpower disguised as struggle. That hunger teaches you things you don't learn in books. It teaches you how to listen when no one is speaking, how to feel beyond the surface, how to find patterns where others see chaos. It teaches you how to adapt, how to pivot, how to bounce back when things fall apart. Because you've already lived through the storm. When others hesitate, you move. When others break, you bend. Because your default isn't comfort. Your default is survival. And when someone who's had to survive learns how to thrive, they become unstoppable. That drive, that fire, comes from knowing how it feels to be overlooked, to be told, you're not enough, to be treated like your dreams are too big for someone from your background. And instead of believing it, you used it. You let that doubt become your motivation. You let the rejection become your reason. Because when you're hungry, you don't need permission. You don't need applause. You don't need the path to be clear. You'll build the damn road yourself. People forget that hunger creates vision. When you don't have distractions, when life strips you down to your core, your focus sharpens. You stop chasing everything and start chasing the thing that matters. That's why some of the most impactful, world-changing people came from nothing, because nothing gave them clarity. It forced them to decide what they really wanted and who they were willing to become to get it. That's where power is born. When you're hungry, you become emotionally agile. You don't fall apart when things don't go your way, because things rarely did. You've already been told, no? So many times, it doesn't even register anymore. Rejection isn't defeat, it's redirection. Delay isn't denial, it's preparation. Setbacks don't scare you, they sharpen you. That's the mindset of someone who came from lack. That's the mindset of someone who's used their pain as preparation. You're not fragile because you've been through it. You're forged in it. You don't need more comfort. You need more alignment with that hunger. Because hunger is not a weakness. Hunger is a signal from your soul that you're built for more. That you're not here to play small, to shrink, to settle. You're here to rise. And the deeper the hunger, the greater the rise. The truth is, when you're hungry, you don't care how many times it takes. You just know you're going to make it. While others seek guarantees, you bet on yourself. While others look for the easy road, you run straight into the storm, because you know what's waiting on the other side. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need that one reason. That one image in your mind of the life you're here to build. And nothing can pull you off course. That kind of hunger doesn't fade. It evolves. It becomes service. It becomes mission. It becomes the very thing that draws people to you. That makes others say, I don't know what they have, but I want it. Because what they're feeling isn't luck or talent or charisma. What they're feeling is hunger turned into fire. There are moments in life that don't just hurt. They shatter. Moments that feel like they leave you broken in pieces so small, you don't know where to begin. Moments that rob you of your innocence, your trust, your sense of stability. Pain that doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door open and sets everything on fire. But here's what most people never realize. Those moments, those battles, those dark nights, they don't just break you, they build you. And the version of you that rises after the fall is always stronger than the one who never faced it at all. When you've been hurt, when you've been abused, rejected, abandoned, it changes something inside you. It makes you question your worth. It makes you doubt your voice. It convinces you that maybe you're just not enough. But beneath all that noise, there is another truth waiting to be uncovered. The pain you survived didn't come to destroy you. It came to shape you, to carve out the space for a version of you so powerful, so grounded, so unshakable, that no one could ever take it away again. We live in a world that avoids pain at all costs. Numb it, escape it, bury it. But pain that is buried stays alive. It festers until one day it controls your choices, your relationships, your future. But when you confront it, when you walk right into it with open eyes and say, "This happened, and I'm still standing," that's when the healing begins. That's when you stop being a prisoner of your past and start becoming the architect of your future. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You don't have to put on a mask of strength to protect the world from your story. Your scars are not shameful. They're sacred. They're proof that you walked through hell and chose not to stay there. That kind of strength can't be faked. It can't be bought. It's forged. In silence. In struggle. In nights where you cried so hard your body ached, but you still showed up the next day. There's something profound about being broken. Not because of the pain, but because of what's uncovered underneath it. When everything is stripped away, your pride, your plans, your illusions, you're left with something real, something raw, something honest. And from that place, you can rebuild, not from ego, not from fear, but from truth. And truth builds a life that can't be shaken. You see, the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs real ones. It needs people who've walked through the fire and come out with empathy in one hand and power in the other. People who don't flinch when someone else cries because they've cried too. People who don't turn away from brokenness because they've found beauty in their own. That's what your pain can become. A bridge, a tool, a mission. When something breaks you, it forces you to decide, do I let this define me or do I let this refine me? That choice, that split second moment where you refuse to let pain have the final word, that's where transformation lives. That's where you realize you were never just a victim of your story. You were the warrior in the middle of it. You didn't just survive. You built something out of the ruins, a mindset, a mission, a meaning. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. You don't become unbreakable by avoiding struggle. You become unbreakable by walking through it and choosing to rise anyway. That rise, that comeback, is where your real story begins. Not in the moments where everything went right, but in the moments where everything went wrong, and you still refuse to give up on yourself. Because when the world sees someone who's been broken and still stands tall, it inspires. It shows what's possible. It makes others believe that maybe, just maybe, they can rise too. And in that belief, the cycle of pain ends and the cycle of power begins. You don't need anyone's approval to rise. You don't need a sign from the universe, a lucky break, or someone to finally notice your potential and say, Now you're allowed to grow. The truth is, transformation doesn't wait for permission. It begins the moment you decide you're done settling. The moment you stop asking, "Am I worthy?" and start declaring, "I'm taking back control." That's the line. That's the moment the old life dies and the new one begins, not with fanfare, but with a quiet decision deep in your gut that says, "I'm done living small." Too many people live trapped in a cage built from other people's opinions. They wait for validation. They wait for someone to understand their pain, believe in their dream, or give them a title, a degree, a platform. But here's what no one tells you: that cage isn't locked. It was never locked. You just got used to sitting in it. You just forgot that the door has always been open, and the key. That key is your decision. Not a perfect plan. Not a perfect moment. Just a decision that says, "I'm ready to step into who I was meant to be, with or without applause." The world is full of people who will try to keep you small. Not because they're evil, but because your growth threatens their comfort. Your rising reminds them of their own excuses. The moment you begin to change, people will resist. Not because you're wrong, but because your transformation forces them to confront their own stagnation. Don't let that noise pull you back. Don't dim your light to make others comfortable. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be liberated. Transformation isn't pretty. It's not a highlight reel. It's a battle between the version of you that's survived and the version that's ready to thrive. It's late nights where you question everything. It's peeling back layers you've worn for years. Stories, beliefs, fears, and realizing they were never really yours. It's standing in front of the mirror and saying, "I'm not who they said I was. I'm not the story I was handed. I get to rewrite this." That takes courage. That takes guts. And it starts the moment you stop waiting to be chosen. You don't need a bigger bank account to begin. You don't need the right family, the perfect background, or someone to hold your hand. You already have everything you need inside you. Resilience, imagination, resourcefulness. But none of it activates until you take the first step. That first step doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be honest. It just has to say, "I'm no longer available for this version of me." And from that moment forward, the universe starts to move. Not because it finally decided to help you, but because you finally decided to help yourself. Most people are terrified of transformation because it requires letting go. Letting go of who they were. Letting go of their comfort zone. Letting go of the identity that got them love or attention, even if it was fake. But real transformation doesn't just change what you do. It changes what you believe is possible. It flips your default from fear to faith, from reacting to creating. And the only way to reach that place is to stop asking for a map and start becoming your own compass. You were not put on this earth to play small. You were not designed to repeat the patterns of your past. You're here to evolve, to expand, to become a living, breathing example of what's possible when someone stops settling and starts claiming. Your transformation isn't a luxury. It's your responsibility. Because every time you rise, you don't just shift your own life. You give permission to others to do the same. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be freed. And that freedom comes from one place: your decision to stop living by someone else's rules and start rewriting your own. Most people walk through life believing that their past defines them, that the pain, the failure, the trauma, the darkness they've experienced is the final chapter of their story. But what if it's not the end? What if the pain was just the prologue? What if every single moment of suffering was preparing you for something far bigger than you imagined? Your story is not over. In fact, the most powerful part hasn't even been written yet. And when you choose to rise, when you decide to turn your scars into strength, that's when your story becomes a message the world needs to hear. The truth is, the most inspiring people on this planet aren't the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who went through hell and refused to stay there. They're the ones who fell, who failed, who were broken, bruised, betrayed. But who decided that those experiences weren't going to be the end of them? They made a different choice. They turned pain into power. They turned wounds into wisdom. And they turned survival into leadership. That same choice is available to you. Not someday. Right now. You may have been told your voice doesn't matter. You may have been silenced, dismissed, made to feel invisible. But let me tell you something. The very thing that others wanted to shut down. Your truth, your experience, your emotion, is the exact thing that someone else is praying to hear. There's a person out there, right now, going through something you've already survived. They don't need a guru. They don't need a perfect role model. They need someone real, someone who's been through it. Someone like you. Your story holds power, immense, world-shifting, soul-awakening power. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Because it has cracks and mess and heartbreak and healing. And when you start telling that story, whether on a stage, in a room, in a conversation, or even just in the way you live, it gives people hope. It gives them permission. It says, if they can rise, maybe I can too. And that's how the cycle of pain ends. Not by pretending it didn't happen, but by choosing to use it. You didn't walk through fire just to hide the flames. You didn't survive the storm just to keep your strength a secret. You made it, and now it's your turn to become the light for someone else. Not by fixing them, not by saving them, but by being so unapologetically yourself that they feel safe enough to be themselves too. That's impact. That's legacy. That's leadership at the highest level. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be perfect. All you need is the courage to be visible. To say, this is who I am, and this is what I've been through, and I'm still here. That one statement can change someone's life. That one act of authenticity can crack open a heart that's been closed for years. That's the ripple effect of truth. And it starts with you being willing to speak. People crave real stories, not filtered versions, not polished lies. They want to feel something. They want to know they're not alone. And when they see someone like you, someone who's risen from pain, from rejection, from fear, they see possibility. They see hope. They see a mirror of their own potential. Every struggle you faced, every tear you shed, every time you thought about giving up, it was building a reservoir of strength that now lives in you. And that strength isn't just for you. It's meant to be shared. Because your healing becomes someone else's roadmap. Your resilience becomes someone else's reason to keep going. And your voice becomes a force that moves the world one heart at a time. Your past is not your prison. It's your platform. It's your testimony. It's your gift. You just have to choose to unwrap it. Not someday. Not when it's convenient. But now. Because the world isn't waiting for someone perfect. It's waiting for someone brave enough to speak.